The wagon wheels splintered with a sound like a breaking bone, and Darren Briggs felt his stomach drop as the entire left side of the cart lurched downward into the mud. He had been 3 days on the road from Fort Calloway, hauling supplies to the northern settlements, and now this miles from anywhere, with storm clouds gathering overhead and the sun already beginning its descent toward the horizon. He set the brake and climbed down, boots squelching in the soft earth as he surveyed the damage. The wheel had cracked clean through 2 spokes, and the iron rim had twisted loose from the wooden frame. It would take at least an hour to fix, maybe more, and he would be working against the failing light. Darren was a broad-shouldered man of 26, with calloused hands and a weathered face that made him look older than his years. He had fought in the border wars 3 years back, seen things he tried not to think about, and afterward had taken up the merchant's life because it seemed quieter, safer. Mostly it was. Mostly he just drove his wagon, delivered his goods, collected his coin, and kept to himself. He had brown hair that hung to his collar and gray eyes that had learned to watch the road ahead and not linger on memories. He pulled his tools from the storage box beneath the driver's seat and got to work. The afternoon was warm despite the threatening clouds, and soon he had stripped down to his shirt, his coat tossed onto the wagon bench. He worked methodically, prying off the damaged wheel, examining the axle for damage, laying out the spare spokes he would need to install. The work absorbed him completely, his mind focused on the immediate problem of wood and iron and leverage. That was why he did not notice the sound at first, a faint scraping, like something shifting in the cargo bed behind him. He paused, hammer raised, and listened. Nothing. He returned to his work, driving a wooden peg into place. Then he heard it again, more clearly now. A definite movement, the sound of crates being nudged aside, and then something heavier sliding across the wagon bed. Darren straightened slowly, setting down his tools. He had loaded this cargo himself 3 days ago, and he knew exactly what should be in that wagon. Sacks of grain, crates of preserved goods, bolts of cloth, farming tools, seeds for the northern settlements. There should be no sound of movement, no sound of anything alive. He walked around to the back of the wagon, his hand instinctively going to the knife at his belt. The canvas cover was still tied down, but not as tightly as he had left it. Someone or something had loosened the ropes. His heart began to beat faster. Bandits sometimes hid in cargo wagons, waiting for the right moment to strike. He had heard stories. But he had been vigilant, had checked his cargo each night, had slept beneath the wagon with one eye open. Slowly, carefully, he untied the canvas and pulled it back. At first he saw nothing amiss. The crates and sacks were still there, still more or less where he had left them. But then he saw the gap, a space beneath the cargo where someone small could have hidden, wedged between the wagon bed and the underside of the stacked supplies. And even as he stared, something moved in that darkness. A hand emerged first. It was larger than a human hand, with thick fingers and nails that were almost claw-like, and the skin was a deep forest green. Darren's breath caught in his throat. He knew what that meant. He had seen hands like that before, gripping weapons across a battlefield, reaching out from the darkness during night raids. Orc. The hand groped for purchase on the edge of a crate, and then another hand joined it, and slowly, painfully, a figure began to drag itself out from beneath the cargo. Darren stood frozen, knife half drawn, as he watched an orc girl crawl into the light. She was shaking. That was the first thing he noticed, beyond the green skin and the small tusks that protruded from her lower jaw. She was trembling violently, her whole body racked with shivers despite the warmth of the day. She pulled herself free of the cargo and collapsed onto the wagon bed, gasping, And that was when Darren saw the rest of her. She was young, maybe 18, maybe 19, and she wore the tattered remains of what might once have been traveling clothes, now filthy and torn. Her dark hair was matted and tangled, hanging in her face. But worse than any of that were the marks on her body. Bruises mottled her green skin, dark purple and black. Her left arm hung at an awkward angle, and when she tried to prop herself up, she whimpered a small, broken sound that cut through Darren's shock like a blade. She had been beaten. Badly. Recently. Their eyes met. Hers were a startling amber color, wide with fear and pain. For a long moment neither of them moved. Darren's hand was still on his knife, and he saw her gaze flick to it, saw her entire body tense despite her injuries. She expected him to draw it. Expected him to finish what someone else had started. He let go of the knife. The girl's eyes widened further, confusion joining the fear. She tried to push herself backward, away from him, but her injured arm gave out and she cried out again, a sound she tried to stifle by biting down on her lower lip. Blood welled around her tusks. "Easy," Darren said, surprised by how hoarse his voice sounded. "Easy. I am not going to hurt you." She did not look like she believed him. She was still shaking, still trying to back away despite the obvious agony it caused her. Darren raised both hands slowly, palms out, showing her he was unarmed. "I am not going to hurt you," he repeated. "You are injured. Let me help." "Liar," she spat, and her voice was rough, as if from screaming or from disuse. "Humans always hurt. Always." She had an accent. He noticed something guttural in the consonants, a slight difference in the rhythm of her words. But she spoke his language well enough to be understood, and the bitterness in her tone was unmistakable. "I am not going to," Darren said again. He kept his hands raised, kept his voice level. "How long have you been under there?" She did not answer. She had managed to drag herself into a corner of the wagon bed, her back against the side rail, her good arm wrapped protectively around her injured one. She was watching him the way a cornered animal watches, all desperate calculation and pain. Darren tried a different approach. "Are you hungry?" Something flickered in her amber eyes. She did not answer, but he saw her throat work as she swallowed. That was answer enough. Moving slowly, telegraphing every motion, Darren reached into his coat pocket and pulled out a piece of dried meat. He had been saving it for his own dinner, but that did not matter now. He held it out toward her. "Take it," he said. She stared at the offered food, then at his face, then back at the food. Suspicion warred with hunger in her expression. The shaking had not stopped. After what felt like an eternity, she reached out with her good hand and snatched the meat from him, so quickly he barely saw her move. She pulled it back to her corner and tore into it with her teeth, her tusks making the action look more fierce than it probably felt. She was starving. That much was obvious. Darren waited until she had finished, then pulled out another piece. This time she took it with slightly less panic, though her eyes never left his face. He gave her a third piece and a fourth, until his small supply of trail food was exhausted. She ate all of it. "There is more in my pack," he said, "and water, but I need to finish fixing the wheel before dark or we will be stuck here all night. Will you stay here? I will not be far." She did not answer, but she did not try to flee either. Darren took that as assent. He returned to his work, though now his mind was racing. An orc girl. Beaten half to death and hiding in his wagon. He should be terrified. He should be furious that she had stowed away, that she might bring trouble down on him. During the border wars he had fought orcs. He had killed orcs. He still dreamed about it sometimes, about the weight of a sword in his hand and the look in their eyes when they fell. The army had told him orcs were savages, monsters, a threat that had to be eliminated. And he had believed it, because that was easier than questioning. But the girl in his wagon did not look like a monster. She looked like someone who had been hurt very badly and was simply trying to survive. Darren worked faster than before, driven by an urgency he could not entirely explain. The clouds were growing darker, and the first drops of rain began to fall as he hammered the last peg into place and tested the repaired wheel. It would hold. It would have to. He gathered his tools and climbed back onto the wagon bench. Behind him, he heard a small sound of alarm as the wagon lurched into motion. He did not look back. He simply drove, keeping the horses to a steady pace despite the rain that was now falling in earnest. He knew of a place not far from here, a traveler's shelter, basically just a roof and 3 walls built beside the road for the use of merchants and messengers. It was not much, but it would keep them dry. The wagon rolled through the gathering dark, rain drumming on the canvas cover, and Darren found himself wondering what in all the hells he was doing. The shelter appeared out of the gloom, exactly where he remembered it. Darren pulled the wagon under the overhang and set the brake. The rain was a steady roar now, but here they were protected. He climbed down and went about unhitching the horses, leading them to the small lean-to stable attached to the shelter. They needed to be rubbed down, fed, watered. The familiar routine steadied him. When the horses were settled, he returned to the wagon. The orc girl had not moved. She was still huddled in her corner, soaked now from the rain that had blown in under the canvas, still shaking. Her lips had taken on a grayish tinge. "Come on," Darren said. "You need to get dry and warm or you will die of cold fever." She shook her head, a jerky, frightened motion. "I have blankets," he said. "A fire, food, you cannot stay out here." "Why?" The word came out harsh, challenging. "Why you help, what you want?" It was a fair question. Darren was not entirely sure he had a good answer. Finally, he said, "Because you are hurt and I can help. That is all." She studied his face for a long moment. Then, slowly, painfully, she began to move. Darren wanted to help her, but he sensed that would be the wrong move. She needed to do this herself, to maintain whatever small measure of control she still had. So he waited as she dragged herself to the edge of the wagon bed, as she carefully lowered herself down, as she nearly collapsed when her feet hit the ground. This time he did move forward, catching her before she fell. She gasped and tried to pull away, but she did not have the strength. Darren kept his grip light, supporting rather than restraining. "The shelter is right here," he said quietly. "Just a few steps." She leaned on him, and he could feel how thin she was beneath the ruined clothes, could feel the tremors that shook her frame. He helped her to the shelter and eased her down onto the wooden bench that ran along one wall. Then he busied himself building a fire in the stone hearth. The wood was dry, he always made sure of that, and soon flames were crackling cheerfully, pushing back the darkness and the damp chill. Darren pulled blankets from his pack and draped them around the girl's shoulders. She clutched them with her good hand, pulling them tight. Her shaking was beginning to subside, though her breathing was still ragged. He heated water over the fire and made a simple broth from dried meat and herbs. When it was ready, he poured it into a wooden cup and offered it to her. She took it, but her hand was shaking so badly that liquid sloshed over the rim. Without thinking, Darren steadied her hand with his own. She froze, her eyes snapping to his face, and he saw the fear spike again. But she did not pull away. Slowly, carefully, she drank. When the cup was empty, he refilled it. She drank that too. Color was beginning to return to her lips. "Your arm," Darren said. "It looks broken. I have some skill with injuries if you will let me look at it." Her jaw clenched. "Why?" "Because if it is broken and it heals wrong, you will never have full use of it again." She considered this. Then, reluctantly, she extended her injured arm. Darren moved closer into the firelight and gently pushed back the torn sleeve of her shirt. The girl hissed in pain but held still. The arm was definitely broken, a clean break above the wrist. Darren had seen enough broken bones during the war to recognize one. He had also set enough of them to know what needed to be done. He found 2 straight pieces of wood in his supplies and tore strips from a spare shirt for binding. "This is going to hurt," he said. She nodded once, her jaw set. He worked as quickly and gently as he could, aligning the bone, binding the splint tight. She made no sound, but tears streamed down her face and her good hand gripped the edge of the bench so hard he thought the wood might crack. When it was done, she slumped forward, breathing hard. "The worst is over," Darren said. He was not sure that was true. She had other injuries, bruises that might indicate internal damage. Gods knew what else, but the immediate crisis was addressed. "Why?" she asked again, and this time her voice was smaller, lost. "Why you help?" Darren sat back on his heels, looking at this strange, broken girl in the firelight. "What is your name?" he asked instead of answering. She hesitated. Then, Grukara. "Grukara," he repeated, testing the sound of it. "I am Darren, and I help because it is the right thing to do." "Humans do not do right thing for orcs," Grukara said bitterly. "Humans hurt orcs, kill orcs. Humans look at orcs and see monsters." "I know," Darren said quietly. "I was a soldier. I fought in the border wars. I know what humans think of your people." Her eyes widened, and for a moment he thought she might bolt again, broken arm or no, but she just stared at him. "You killed orcs?" "Yes." There was no point in lying. "Then why you help me?" It was the 3rd time she had asked, and Darren realized he needed to give her a real answer. He looked at the fire, at the dancing flames, and spoke slowly. "During the war, I did what I was told. I believed what I was told. That orcs were the enemy, that you were all savages who wanted to destroy us. But then the war ended and I came home, and I had time to think. To remember things I had seen that did not fit that story. And I started to wonder if maybe I had been wrong, if maybe we all had been wrong." He looked back at her. "When I saw you in my wagon, hurt like that, scared like that, I did not see an orc. I saw someone who needed help, so I helped." Grukara was silent for a long time. The rain continued to drum on the roof, and the fire crackled, and the horses shifted in their stable. Finally, she said, "Humans hurt me. Humans from Fort Callaway. I was traveling alone, trying to reach the northern territories where orc clans still live. They found me on the road. They said I was not allowed. They said I was trespassing. They beat me and left me to die." Her voice dropped to a whisper. "I crawled to road, found your wagon, hid." Rage flared in Darren's chest, hot and sudden. He knew the kind of men she was talking about. He had served with some of them. Men who saw the peace treaty as an inconvenience, who believed the war should have continued until every orc was dead. Men who would absolutely beat a lone orc girl and leave her for dead, then go back to town and boast about keeping the roads safe. "I am sorry," he said, and meant it. "I am sorry that happened to you." She looked at him with those amber eyes, searching for something. Then, slowly, she nodded. It was not forgiveness exactly, but it was acknowledgement. They sat in silence for a while after that. Darren cooked a more substantial meal, oat cakes and beans. Simple fare but filling, and Grukara ate like she had not seen food in days. She probably had not. When they were finished, exhaustion was written clearly on her face. The firelight cast shadows under her eyes, highlighting the bruises. "You should sleep," Darren said. "You are safe here, I promise." "Your promises mean nothing," Grukara said, but there was less hostility in it now, more simple fact. She shifted on the bench, trying to find a position that did not aggravate her injuries, and Darren saw her wince. He dragged his bedroll over and spread it on the ground near the fire. Then he pointed to it. "Take it. It is softer than the bench, where you sleep. I have slept on worse than a wooden bench." She hesitated, then carefully lowered herself onto the bedroll. The relief on her face was immediate. Darren added more wood to the fire and settled himself on the bench she had vacated. It was uncomfortable, but he had told the truth. He had slept in worse places. He leaned back against the wall and closed his eyes. Darren, he opened his eyes. Grukara was looking at him from the bedroll, her face barely visible in the firelight. Yes, thank you. They were the first words she had spoken to him that did not carry a knife edge of bitterness or fear. Darren felt something warm unfold in his chest, something that had nothing to do with the fire. "You are welcome," he said. He listened as her breathing gradually deepened and steadied as she fell into the sleep of pure exhaustion. Only then did he let himself relax slightly. But he did not sleep deeply. Part of him remained alert, listening for any sound that might indicate danger, because he knew that if the men who had hurt Grukara learned she had survived, they would come looking, and if they found her with him, they would come for them both. Morning arrived with pale gray light and the smell of rain-washed earth. The storm had passed during the night, leaving everything clean and new. Darren woke to find Grukara already awake, sitting up in the bedroll and watching him with an unreadable expression. Her color was better, he noticed. The rest had done her good, though she still moved carefully, favoring her injuries. He stirred up the fire and made breakfast more oat cakes, tea brewed from herbs and dried leaves. Grukara accepted her share without comment and ate steadily. When they were finished, Darren began packing up his supplies and Grukara watched him work. "Where you go?" she asked finally. "North," Darren said. "I have deliveries to make to the settlements along the border. It will take about a week, maybe longer depending on the roads. And after that, I return to Fort Callaway, pick up more cargo, start again. You leave me here." There was no accusation in the question, but something about it made Darren pause. He turned to face her fully. "I was going to ask what you wanted to do. You said you were trying to reach the Northern Territories." "I am going that direction. You could travel with me if you want, at least until you are healed enough to manage on your own." Grukara stared at him. "Why you do that?" "Because traveling alone when you are injured is dangerous, and because he hesitated, trying to find the right words. "I do not want to just leave you here, not after what happened." "You not worry someone see you with Orc, cause trouble?" "Maybe," Darren admitted. "Probably, but that is my problem, not yours." She was quiet for a long moment, considering, then she nodded once. "I go with you. Until I strong again." "Good," Darren said, and was surprised by how much he meant it. They set out within the hour. Darren helped Grukara onto the wagon bench. She was still too weak to climb up herself, and then took the reins. The horses started forward, pulling the wagon back onto the road, and the journey continued. For the first few hours, they traveled in silence. Grukara sat stiffly beside him, her splinted arm cradled against her chest, her eyes scanning the road ahead with the wariness of someone who had learned not to trust in safety. Darren kept his attention on driving, but he was acutely aware of her presence beside him. It felt strange to have a companion after so many months of traveling alone. Strange, but not entirely unwelcome. Around midday, Grukara spoke. "You said you were soldier." "How long?" 3 years, Darren said. "I enlisted when I was 22. The war was at its worst and they needed men. It seemed like the right thing to do at the time. You regret it, sometimes." He glanced at her. "I regret some of the things I did, some of the things I saw, but if I had not gone, someone else would have taken my place and maybe they would have done worse things. I do not know if that makes it better or worse." "War is war," Grukara said. "Everyone do terrible things in war, orc and human both." "Did you fight?" "No, I was too young, but my clan fought. My father fought, my brothers." Her voice grew distant. "They not come home." I am sorry, Darren said quietly. Not your fault. Maybe not even humans' fault. Just war. She fell silent again, and Darren did not push. They stopped for lunch beside a stream, letting the horses drink while they ate bread and cheese. Grukara moved a little more easily now, though she was still obviously in pain. She washed her face and hands in the stream, and when she straightened, Darren saw that some of the tension had left her shoulders. "Feel better?" he asked. "Little bit," she admitted. Then, hesitantly, "Your supplies?" "The ones in Wagon. They important. They are promised to people who need them. Farmers, mostly, seeds and tools for the planting season. Why? I not want to cause trouble. If people see me, they not accept deliveries from you." It was a valid concern. Darren had been thinking about it himself. "We will manage," he said. "Most of the settlements I deliver to are small, isolated. The people there are more concerned with survival than with politics. If anyone makes trouble, we will deal with it then." Grukara nodded slowly, accepting this. They finished their meal and continued on. The days began to blur together into a rhythm. They traveled during daylight hours, covering as much ground as they could while the weather held. In the evenings, they made camp, sometimes in travelers' shelters like the first night, sometimes simply beside the road, with the wagon providing shelter. Darren taught Grukara how to help with the horses, working around her injured arm, and she proved to be a quick learner. She also proved to be a good companion, once her initial wariness began to fade. She had a dry sense of humor that caught him off guard sometimes, and she was surprisingly knowledgeable about the land they traveled through, pointing out plants that were edible or useful, reading the weather in the clouds. In turn, Darren found himself talking to her about things he had not spoken of in years. His life before the war, growing up on a small farm in the southern provinces. His mother, who had died when he was young. His father, who had never recovered from her loss and had passed away while Darren was at war. The farm had been sold to pay debts, and Darren had come home to find himself with no home to return to. That was when he had become a merchant, buying the wagon and horses with his military pay, taking to the roads because there was nowhere else to go. Grukara listened to all of this without comment, but her expression softened as he spoke. And eventually, she began to share her own stories. She told him about her clan, the Stonefang Orcs, who had lived in the eastern mountains for generations. She described the great stone halls where her people gathered, the ceremonies and festivals, the songs sung in the old language. She spoke of her mother, who had been a storyteller, and her father, who had been a warrior. She told him about her brothers, who had been fierce and brave and foolish, and who had died in the same battle, fighting side by side. She told him about the day the war ended and how her clan had celebrated, believing that peace would mean safety. But it did not, she said bitterly. They were sitting by a fire, several days into the journey, and the night was cool and clear around them. Humans still hate us, still hurt us. We try to live in peace, but humans not let us. They take our lands. They drive us away. They kill us if we resist. So clans scatter. Some go north, try to find new territories. Some go south into deep mountains. Some just disappear. "What about you?" Darren asked. "Where is your clan now?" "Gone," Grukara said flatly. "After brothers died, mother could not bear it. She died too of grief. Father tried to hold clan together, but too many losses, too much pain. People left one by one. Father left too, went to join other clans in north. He asked me to come, but I not ready. I stayed. Tried to make life work alone, but human villages not accept me. I could not hunt, could not trade. So finally I decided to follow father north. And then," she gestured to her splinted arm, to the fading bruises on her face, "rest." Darren felt the now familiar surge of anger at the men who had done this to her. "You think your father is still in the north?" Maybe, I not know, I have no way to find him. She stared into the fire. Maybe it not matter. Maybe I just need to find somewhere to belong, somewhere safe. You belong here, Darren said before he could stop himself. Grukara looked at him sharply. What? He had not planned to say it. The words had simply emerged, carrying a truth he had not fully acknowledged until that moment. But now that they were out, he could not take them back. And he was not sure he wanted to. I mean, you are welcome to travel with me, for as long as you want, not just until you are healed, after that too, if you want. He was making a mess of this, but he pushed on. I know I am just a human, and you have no reason to trust me, but I like having you here. You make the road less lonely, and I hope you might feel safer with me than you would on your own. Grukara was staring at him with an expression he could not read. The firelight played across her green skin, glinted off her small tusks. Her amber eyes were wide, searching his face. You mean this? This not just feel sorry for me? No, Darren said firmly. I mean it. I would like you to stay. She was quiet for so long that he thought she might refuse. Then, slowly, she said, I think about it. It was not a yes, but it was not a no either. Darren nodded, accepting this. They sat in companionable silence for a while longer, and then Grukara rose and went to her bedroll. Darren banked the fire and settled into his own blankets. And as he drifted off to sleep, he found himself hoping that she would say yes. The next day brought them to the first of Darren's delivery stops, a small farmstead carved out of the forest, home to a family named the Carters. Darren had been delivering supplies to them for 2 years now, and they had always been decent people, hardworking and honest. But as he pulled the wagon up to their cabin, with Grukara sitting visibly on the bench beside him, he saw the way their expressions changed. The father, a tall man with a beard shot through with gray, stepped forward with his hand on the axe at his belt. His wife gathered their 2 children behind her, eyes wide with fear. Darren, the man said carefully. What is this? This is Grukara, Darren said calmly. She is traveling with me. She means you no harm. She is an orc, the wife said, her voice shrill. She is a person, Darren corrected, and she is my friend. The Carters looked at each other uncertainly. Darren climbed down from the wagon and began unloading their supplies, sacks of seed grain, new plowshares, a bolt of sturdy cloth. He worked methodically, stacking everything on the ground while the family watched in tense silence. When he was finished, he straightened and faced them. Your supplies, as ordered. The coin we agreed on covers it, same as always. The father hesitated, then nodded slowly. He fetched the coin and pressed it into Darren's hand without taking his eyes off Grukara. She really not dangerous. She is injured and recovering, Darren said. She is about as dangerous as your daughter there. He nodded toward the young girl peeking out from behind her mother. The father grunted. He looked at Grukara for a long moment, then back at Darren. You vouch for her? I do. Then I suppose that is good enough. He did not sound entirely convinced, but he relaxed fractionally. You be careful, Darren. Not everyone going to be as understanding. I know, Darren said, but thank you. He climbed back onto the wagon and they set off again. When they were out of sight of the farmstead, Grukara let out a breath she seemed to have been holding. That could have gone worse, she said. Could have gone better too, Darren said, but at least they did not run us off with pitchforks. That what you expect. It was a possibility. Grukara shook her head. You take big risk for me. Yes, Darren agreed simply. She looked at him and something shifted in her expression, something softer, warmer. Why? It was the question she kept asking in different forms, and Darren realized that she needed to keep asking it because she genuinely could not understand his answer. She had been hurt too many times, taught too thoroughly that humans only brought pain. Every act of kindness was incomprehensible to her, a puzzle she needed to keep testing to see if it was real, so he told her the truth. Because you matter. Because you deserve kindness and safety and someone who cares whether you live or die. And because, he hesitated, then forged ahead. Because when I look at you, I see someone I want to protect, someone I want to know better, someone who makes me feel less alone. Grukara was silent for a long time. Then, very quietly, she said, I feel less alone too. With you. Darren's heart did something complicated in his chest. He kept his eyes on the road ahead, but he was smiling. They made 3 more deliveries over the next week, and each one went a little differently. At one farm, the family was openly hostile, refusing to accept the supplies if Darren would not send Grukara away. Darren calmly loaded everything back onto the wagon and told them they could send word when they were ready to do business properly. At another, the farmer barely glanced at Grukara, too exhausted and worried about his failing crops to care about the politics of it all. And at the third, an elderly widow surprised them both by inviting Grukara to sit and share tea, chatting amiably about the weather and the state of the roads as if having an orc guest was the most normal thing in the world. She reminded me of my mother, Grukara said later, as they made camp. Same way of talking. Like she already decided you are friend, so why waste time with suspicion? Some people are like that, Darren agreed. I wish more were. Grukara was recovering steadily. The splint on her arm would need to stay for several more weeks, but the rest of her injuries were healing well. The bruises had faded to yellow and green, and she moved with increasing ease. She was also growing more comfortable around Darren, smiling more often, laughing at his jokes, sitting closer to him by the fire in the evenings. And Darren found himself increasingly aware of her presence in ways that had nothing to do with friendship. He noticed the way she tilted her head when she was listening to him, the way she bit her lower lip when she was thinking, her small tusks pressing into the green skin, the way her eyes caught the firelight and glowed like embers, the way her laugh sounded, rough and genuine and startlingly beautiful. He noticed all of it, and he tried not to think too much about what it meant. But one evening, about 2 weeks into their journey, things shifted again. They were camped beside a river, and Grukara had gone to wash while Darren cooked dinner. When she returned, her hair was wet and slicked back from her face, and she was wearing a clean shirt that Darren had given her a few days earlier. It was too big on her, hanging loose around her strong shoulders, and somehow that made her look younger, more vulnerable. She sat down beside him closer than usual and watched him work. Darren, she said after a while. Yes. What happened after delivery's done? You go back to Fort Callaway. That was the plan, he admitted. But I have been thinking. There are other towns that need supplies, other routes I could take. I do not have to go back to Fort Callaway, not right away. Why you avoid it? He set down the spoon he had been stirring with and looked at her. Because I do not want to risk running into the men who hurt you, and because honestly I am not ready for this to end, for you to go your own way. Grukara's eyes searched his face. What if I not want to go my own way? What if I want to stay? Darren's breath caught. You do. You ask me to think about it. I think about it. I want to stay with you. She hesitated, then added very quietly, if you still want that. I do, Darren said, and his voice came out rougher than he intended. I absolutely do, Grukara smiled, and it transformed her face. Darren had seen her smile before, brief flashes of humor or pleasure, but this was different. This was unguarded, genuine joy, and it was directed entirely at him. He felt something in his chest crack open, something warm and overwhelming flooding in. Grukara, he said. I need to tell you something. What? I think I am falling in love with you. The words hung in the air between them, impossible to take back. Grukara's smile faded, replaced by an expression of shock, then wonder, then something that might have been fear. "You cannot," she whispered. "I am orc. You are human. We not supposed to people not allow." "I do not care what people allow," Darren said. "I care about you, and I hope you care about me too." "I do," Grukara said, and now there were tears in her amber eyes. "I care so much, but Darren, this dangerous. For both of us. If people find out, then we will deal with it," Darren said. "Together." "Grukara, I have spent 3 years trying not to feel anything, trying to just exist without connection or purpose. And then you crawled out from under that cargo, shaking and hurt, and everything changed. You make me want to be better. You make me want to fight for something that matters, and you matter, more than anything." A tear spilled down her cheek, tracing a line through her green skin. "I so scared," she whispered. "I scared this not real. I scared you change mind. I scared something happen and I lose you." "I am scared too," Darren admitted. "But I would rather be scared with you than safe without you." Grukara made a sound that was half laugh, half sob. Then, before he could react, she leaned forward and pressed her forehead against his. It was not a kiss. He was not sure if orcs kissed the way humans did, but it was intimate and tender, and it said everything words could not. They stayed like that for a long moment, breathing together, and Darren felt more at peace than he had in years. When they finally pulled apart, Grukara said, "What we do now?" "Now we finish the deliveries," Darren said. "And then we decide together what comes next. Maybe we go north, try to find your father. Maybe we find a place on the frontier where no one cares about human and orc. Maybe we just keep traveling, the two of us against the world. I do not know, but we will figure it out." "Together," Grukara said, testing the word. "Together," Darren confirmed. She smiled again, that transforming smile, and Darren knew he would do whatever it took to keep that smile on her face. They finished the last 3 deliveries without incident, and with each stop, Darren noticed Grukara growing more confident. She started helping with the unloading, working around her splinted arm, and several of the farmers actually thanked her directly. It was a small thing, but he saw how much it meant to her to be acknowledged as a person, not a monster. Their final delivery was to a settlement at the very edge of the frontier, a cluster of cabins carved out of the wilderness. The people there were a mix of humans and dwarves, with a few half-elves thrown in, all united by the shared struggle of building a life in harsh territory. They were too busy with survival to care much about the politics of the South, and they accepted Grukara's presence without comment. One of the dwarves even offered her a drink of his home-brewed ale, which she accepted with a laugh. That night, camped on the outskirts of the settlement, Darren and Grukara sat by their fire and discussed the future. "I have enough coins saved to buy more supplies," Darren said. "We could keep working this route or try new ones, or we could do something completely different. I know a man in one of the settlements who has been looking for help clearing land. The work is hard but honest. We could settle down if you want." "What you want?" Grukara asked. "I want to be with you," Darren said. "Everything else is secondary." Grukara considered this. I think I want to try to find my father, to let him know I alive, that I safe, and then maybe we find place to settle, build life, together." "Then that is what we will do," Darren said. They spent the next week traveling northeast, following rumors and second-hand reports about where the displaced orc clans had gone. It was slow going, and there were more than a few dead ends, but gradually they pieced together a trail. The Stonefang clan, or what remained of it, had reportedly settled in a valley deep in the northern mountains, trying to rebuild. As they traveled, Darren and Grukara grew ever closer. They talked for hours each day, sharing stories and dreams and fears. They worked together seamlessly, setting up and breaking down camp, caring for the horses, navigating the increasingly rough roads. And at night, they slept near each other, close enough that Darren could reach out and touch her if he wanted, could reassure himself that she was real and safe and there. One night, as they lay in their bedrolls beneath a sky full of stars, Grukara reached out and took his hand. Her skin was warmer than his, slightly rough, and her grip was strong despite her healing injuries. Darren laced his fingers through hers and felt something settle inside him, something that had been restless and searching for as long as he could remember. "I love you," Grukara said quietly. "I should say it. You say it to me and I feel it, but I not say it. So I say now, I love you, Darren." "I love you too," Darren said, his voice thick with emotion. They fell asleep like that, hands clasped, and Darren slept more soundly than he had in years. The mountains loomed larger with each passing day, their peaks white with late spring snow. The roads became little more than trails, and eventually even the trails gave out. Darren had to leave the wagon at a small trading post, paying the owner to watch it and the horses while he and Grukara continued on foot. He loaded what supplies they needed into packs, and they set off into the wilderness. Grukara navigated with confidence, reading signs in the landscape that were invisible to Darren's eyes. She pointed out marker stones stacked in certain patterns, trees with cuts in the bark that told her they were on the right path. And finally, after 2 days of hard hiking, they crested a ridge and looked down into a valley where smoke rose from a collection of rough shelters. "That is them," Grukara breathed. "That is my clan." They descended into the valley as the sun was setting, and orcs emerged from the shelters to watch their approach. They were wary, armed with spears and axes, but when one of them recognized Grukara, a shout went up. An older orc, broad-shouldered and scarred, pushed through the crowd. His skin was a darker green than Grukara's, weathered and lined, and his tusks were larger, yellowed with age. But his eyes were the same amber as Grukara's. "Daughter," he said, his voice rough with disbelief. "Father," Grukara said, and then she was running forward and he was catching her, and they were embracing with a fierceness that made Darren's throat tight. The reunion was joyous and chaotic. Other orcs gathered around, asking questions, exclaiming over Grukara's presence. Darren hung back, not wanting to intrude, but Grukara reached back and grabbed his hand, pulling him forward. "This is Darren," she said, her voice carrying over the noise. "He saved my life." She hesitated, then squared her shoulders and spoke clearly. "He is my mate." The word sent a shock through the gathered orcs. Mate. It was not a term humans used, but Darren understood its weight. It meant partnership, commitment, love. It meant she had chosen him, claimed him in a way that her people would recognize. Grukara's father looked at Darren, his expression unreadable. Then he stepped forward and clasped Darren's shoulder with one massive hand. "You protect my daughter." "Yes," Darren said. "I will protect her with my life." "Then you are welcome," the old orc said. "Any who love Grukara is clan." That night, the clan built a huge fire and roasted meat and told stories late into the night. Darren sat beside Grukara, surrounded by orcs who had every reason to hate him and his kind, and felt himself accepted in a way he had never expected. They asked him questions about the South, about the war, about his intentions toward Grukara, and he answered honestly. And gradually, he saw their suspicion fade, replaced by cautious respect. Grukara's father, whose name was Gramek, sat on her other side and told her about the clan's journey north, about the struggles to establish a new home. They had lost many, he said, but those who remained were determined to survive, to build something lasting. He spoke of hope, and Darren heard in his words an echo of his own desire to find a place to belong, to build a life that mattered. Later, when the fire had burned low and most of the clan had retired to their shelters, Gromek pulled Darren aside. "You know this not easy path," he said quietly. "Human and orc together, many on both sides will condemn you." "I know," Darren said, "but I love her and she loves me. That is enough." Gromek studied him for a long moment, then nodded slowly. "You are braver than most humans, or more foolish. Time will tell." He paused, then added, "But I hope you are good for my daughter. She happier than I have seen her in long time." "She is good for me too," Darren said. Gromek clapped him on the shoulder, nearly knocking him over, and laughed. "Then that is settled. You stay with clan, you and Grukara. We build shelter for you. You help us, we help you. This is Orc way." "Thank you," Darren said, and meant it with every fiber of his being. Over the following weeks, Darren and Grukara settled into life with the Stonefang clan. They built a shelter of their own, a sturdy structure of wood and stone nestled at the edge of the settlement. Darren used his skills to help the clan in various ways, repairing tools, teaching them some human construction techniques, even helping to establish trade relationships with a nearby dwarven settlement. Grukara, her arm finally healed, took up her own work hunting, gathering, teaching the younger orcs the old stories her mother had told her, and in the evenings they returned to their shelter and to each other. They learned each other's languages, both verbal and physical. Darren learned that orcs did kiss, though it was different with Grukara's tusks involved, and she learned the human customs he had grown up with. They talked and laughed and made plans for the future. And slowly, day by day, they built a life together. One evening, about 2 months after their arrival, Darren found himself standing outside their shelter looking up at the stars. Grukara came to stand beside him, slipping her hand into his. "What you think about?" she asked. "About how strange life is," Darren said. "A year ago I was alone, just going through the motions. And now I am here with you, with your clan. I have a home, I have purpose, I have love." He turned to face her. "I have everything I ever wanted and did not know I was looking for." Grukara smiled up at him, and in the starlight her eyes glowed. "I feel same. You give me hope when I have none. You give me reason to keep going. You give me love when I think I never have it." "I want to spend the rest of my life with you," Darren said. "I want to build a family with you if that is possible. I want to grow old beside you. Will you have me, truly, forever?" "Yes," Grukara said without hesitation. "Yes, always, forever. You are mine and I am yours." They sealed the promise the way both their peoples would understand, with a kiss, deep and passionate and full of commitment. And when they finally pulled apart, breathless and smiling, Darren knew that he had found what he had been searching for all along. Not just a place to belong. Not just a purpose, but someone to share it all with. Someone who saw past the scars of war and prejudice to the person beneath. Someone who loved him as fiercely as he loved her. The next day, they gathered the clan together and made their commitment official. In Orc tradition, this meant a ceremony where they exchanged vows before the entire community, binding themselves to each other in the eyes of their people. Gromek presided, speaking in the old language, and Darren repeated the words as best he could, stumbling over the unfamiliar sounds. Grukara spoke her vows in return, her voice clear and strong, and when it was done, the clan erupted in cheers. They celebrated late into the night, and Darren felt a sense of belonging he had never experienced before. These orcs, who could have rejected him, who could have driven him away or worse, had instead accepted him as one of their own. Because Grukara had chosen him, and in their culture, that choice was sacred. As the seasons turned and spring gave way to summer, Darren and Grukara settled fully into their new life. The clan thrived in its new home, establishing farms and hunting grounds, building permanent structures to replace the rough shelters. Darren's wagon, retrieved from the trading post, became a vital link between the clan and the outside world, allowing them to trade goods and maintain relationships with nearby settlements. And Grukara bloomed in ways Darren had never imagined. The frightened, broken girl he had found shaking in his wagon was gone, replaced by a confident, capable woman who led hunting parties and taught the young, and stood at his side as an equal partner in all things. Her laughter rang out frequently now, and the shadows that had haunted her eyes had faded. One evening, as they sat together watching the sunset paint the mountains gold and purple, Grukara leaned her head on Darren's shoulder and sighed contentedly. "Happy?" Darren asked, wrapping his arm around her. "More than I ever think possible," Grukara said. "You know, when those men hurt me, when they leave me to die, I think that is end. I think I have no future, no hope, and then you find me. You save me, you love me." "You saved me too," Darren said quietly. "I was just going through the motions before you, existing but not really living. You gave me a reason to care again." "We save each other then," Grukara said, and her smile was radiant. "We did," Darren agreed. They sat in comfortable silence for a while, watching the light fade from the sky. Then Grukara spoke again. "I have news." "What kind of news?" "Good news, I think, I hope." She took his hand and pressed it gently against her stomach. "I am with child, our child." For a moment Darren could not breathe, then joy exploded through him, so intense it was almost painful. "Truly." "You are certain?" The healer confirmed it this morning. "I wanted to wait to tell you at right time." She looked up at him, suddenly uncertain. "You are happy?" "I know half orc, half human children are rare, and they will face difficulties, but I am overjoyed," Darren said, cutting off her worried words. He cupped her face in his hands, looking into those amber eyes that had become his entire world. "I am so happy I can barely find words for it. We are going to be parents. We are going to have a family." Grukara's eyes filled with tears, but she was smiling. "A family," she repeated as if testing the word. "Yes, we make family, you and me and our child." "And the clan," Darren added. "Our child will have so many aunts and uncles and grandparents. They will be loved and protected and welcomed. They will never doubt that they belong." "Never," Grukara agreed fiercely. "We make sure of that." That night, they told Gromak the news, and the old orc's roar of delight could be heard throughout the valley. He swept Grukara up in a hug that lifted her clear off the ground, then did the same to Darren, nearly cracking his ribs in the process. The clan celebrated with them, and Darren found himself surrounded by orcs who clapped him on the back and offered advice and congratulations in equal measure. As the months passed, and Grukara's pregnancy progressed, the clan rallied around them. They expanded the shelter to make room for the baby, built a cradle from smooth mountain wood, gathered soft furs for blankets. The other orc women shared their knowledge with Grukara, teaching her what to expect, how to prepare. And Darren, nervous and excited in equal measure, did everything he could to support her. Winter came, bringing snow to the mountains and a quiet peace to the valley. Grukara grew round with their child, and Darren found himself constantly amazed by the changes in her body, by the life they had created together. He would place his hand on her stomach and feel the baby kick, and it filled him with a wonder he had never known. On a cold night in the depths of winter, as a blizzard howled outside, Grukara went into labor. Darren stayed by her side through the long hours, holding her hand, offering what comfort he could. The clan's healer attended her, calm and efficient, and Gromak paced outside like a caged bear. And finally, as dawn broke over the snow-covered mountains, their child was born. She was perfect. small and squalling, with skin a lighter shade of green than her mother's and ears that were slightly pointed but not quite as prominent. She had no tusks, yet those would come later, the healer explained, but she had Grukara's eyes, amber and bright and full of life. "A daughter," Grukara whispered, cradling the baby against her chest. "We have daughter, Darren." "She is beautiful," Darren said, his voice thick with emotion. "She is perfect. What should we name her?" They had discussed names for months, debating between human names and orc names, trying to find something that honored both their heritages. Now, looking at their daughter, Grukara said, "Kira. It means hope in Old Tongue. She is our hope. Hope for future where human and orc can love without fear. Hope for world better than one we know." "Kira," Darren repeated, trying the name. It felt right, solid, and meaningful. "Yes, Kira Briggs," Grukara smiled. "Kira Briggs Stonefang, she have both names, both heritages. She never forget where she come from." "Never," Darren agreed. Gromek was allowed in shortly after, and the old orc's face transformed when he saw his granddaughter. He held Kira with surprising gentleness, his scarred hands cradling her as if she were made of spun glass, and Darren saw tears in his eyes. "She is strong," Gromek pronounced. "She will grow to be mighty warrior or mighty healer or mighty leader. Whatever she choose, she will be great." "She will be loved," Grukara said. "That is most important." "Yes," Gromek agreed. "She will be loved." The clan celebrated Kira's birth with gifts and songs and a feast that lasted 2 days. She was passed from hand to hand, admired and cooed over by orcs who had initially been uncertain about Darren's presence, but who now embraced his daughter as one of their own. And Darren, watching it all, felt a contentment so deep it was almost painful. This was what he had fought for during the war, though he had not known it at the time. Not victory or territory or pride, but this, the chance for different peoples to come together, to build something new, to create a future where children like Kira could exist without fear or shame. As winter gave way to spring and Kira grew, Darren and Grukara settled into the rhythms of parenthood. They took turns walking her when she cried at night, teaching her to smile and laugh, marveling at every small milestone. Darren taught her human lullabies and Grukara taught her orc songs. They told her stories of both their peoples, determined that she would know and love both sides of her heritage, and the clan embraced her completely. Kira became the valley's treasure, doted on by everyone. Gromek was a devoted grandfather, carving toys for her and carrying her on his shoulders as soon as she was old enough. The other children of the clan played with her, never questioning why she looked different or why her father was human. To them, she was simply Kira and she belonged. As the months turned into years, Darren watched his daughter grow with pride and wonder. She was quick and curious, inheriting her mother's strength and her father's gentle nature. She learned to speak both human common and the orcish language, switching between them effortlessly. She learned to hunt and gather with Grukara, and to read and write with Darren. She was a bridge between two worlds, and she wore that role with unconscious grace. One afternoon, when Kira was about 3 years old, Darren found her sitting with a group of orc children, telling them a story. She had inherited Grukara's mother's talent for storytelling, it seemed, and the children were rapt, listening as she wove a tale of brave warriors and clever healers, and the importance of protecting those you loved. Grukara came to stand beside Darren, slipping her hand into his as they watched their daughter together. "She is remarkable," Grukara said softly. "She gets it from her mother," Darren said, "and her father," Grukara countered. "She have your kindness, your belief that people can be better than they are. That is gift." They stood together, watching Kira, and Darren felt the weight of their journey settle over him. From that desperate night when he found her shaking in his wagon to this moment, watching their daughter thrive in a community that loved her, it had been a long road. A difficult road, but every moment had been worth it. "You ever regret it?" he asked Grukara. "Choosing me, this life?" Grukara looked at him with surprise. "Never, not once, never," Darren said firmly. "You are the best thing that ever happened to me, you and Kira both." "Good," Grukara said and kissed him, "because you are stuck with us now." "I would not have it any other way," Darren said. That evening, as they tucked Kira into bed, their daughter asked them a question she had asked many times before. "Tell me story of how you meet." Darren and Grukara exchanged a smile. This was a ritual now, one Kira never tired of. "Once upon a time," Darren began, "I was traveling alone hauling supplies in my wagon, and the wheel broke and I stopped to fix it. And I was hiding," Grukara continued, picking up the story. "I was hurt and scared and I not know if I survive. But I crawl out from under cargo and your father, he see me. And I stopped to help," Darren said, "because that is what you do when someone needs help, no matter who they are or where they come from. And he was kind to me," Grukara said, "even though he have no reason to be. He feed me and heal me and protect me, and I fall in love with him." "And I fell in love with her," Darren said. "And we traveled together and we found your grandfather's clan and we built a life here. And then you came along and our family was complete." Kira smiled, satisfied, and closed her eyes. "I glad Papa stopped to fix wheel," she murmured drowsily. "So am I," Darren said, stroking her hair. "So am I." They left her sleeping and retreated to their own corner of the shelter. Outside, the stars were bright in the clear mountain sky, and the sounds of the clan settling in for the night drifted through the air. Grukara leaned against Darren, and he wrapped his arms around her, holding her close. "You think the world will ever be ready for people like us?" Grukara asked quietly. "For families like ours, I do not know," Darren admitted. "Maybe not in our lifetime, but Kira and others like her, they will make it ready. They will show the world that love does not care about the color of your skin or the shape of your ears. That family is built on more than blood, that we are all just people trying to find our way." "That is big burden to put on children," Grukara said. "They will not be alone," Darren said. "We will be there to help them, to teach them, to show them that it is possible because we did it." Grukara nodded slowly. "Yes, we did it. Against all odds, against all hate, we build this life, we make it work. And we will keep making it work," Darren said, "for as long as we have breath in our bodies." "For as long as we have breath," Grukara echoed. They stood together in the doorway of their home, looking out at the valley that had become their sanctuary. It was not a perfect place, nowhere was perfect. But it was theirs, built through struggle and love and an unwavering commitment to each other. And that was enough. Years continued to pass, each one adding new layers to their story. The clan grew and prospered, welcoming new members and forging alliances with neighboring settlements. Trade routes were established, bringing goods and news from the wider world. And slowly, word began to spread of the valley where humans and orcs lived side by side, where a human merchant and an orc woman had built a family and proven that peace was possible. Some came to see for themselves, skeptical but curious. Some came seeking refuge, fleeing prejudice in their own communities. And the Stonefang clan welcomed them all, with Darren and Grukara as living proof that the old hatreds did not have to define the future. Kira grew into a strong, confident young woman, beloved by the clan and respected beyond it. She became a bridge in truth, traveling between human and orc settlements, facilitating trade and understanding. She carried her parents' message of hope wherever she went, and she did it with grace and strength. And Darren and Grukara watched it all with pride and love. They grew older together, their hair graying, their bodies marked by the passage of time. But their love never wavered. If anything, it deepened, becoming something richer and more complex with each passing year. On a warm summer evening, when Darren was in his 50s and Grukara was approaching middle age by Orc standards, they sat together outside their home, watching the sunset as they had done 1,000 times before. Kira was visiting, along with her own husband, a thoughtful young Orc who adored her, and their grandchildren played nearby, their laughter ringing through the valley. "We did good," Grukara said, taking Darren's hand. "We did," Darren agreed. "Better than I ever dreamed." "You know what I think about sometimes," Grukara said. "I think about that night when I hid in your wagon, when I was so scared and hurt. And I think about what would have happened if you had been a different kind of person, if you had driven me away or hurt me more." "But I did not," Darren said gently. "No, you did not. You chose kindness. You chose to see me as person, not monster, and that choice changed everything. Not just for me, but for so many others. Our daughter, our grandchildren, the clan, everyone who come here seeking peace. All because you stopped to fix wheel and found me shaking in your wagon." Darren squeezed her hand. "You give me too much credit. You are the one who was brave enough to trust me, who was strong enough to build this life with me. I just offered my hand. You are the one who took it." "We both brave," Grukara said. "We both make choice to love when world tell us we should hate. That is why it work." "That is why it worked," Darren agreed. They sat in comfortable silence, watching their grandchildren play and their daughter laugh with her husband. The valley was bathed in golden light, peaceful and beautiful, and Darren felt a contentment so complete, it was almost transcendent. This was his legacy. Not the battles he had fought or the roads he had traveled, but this. A family built on love, a community built on acceptance, a future built on hope. And it had all started because he had stopped to fix a broken wheel, and an Orc girl had crawled out from under his cargo, shaking. "I love you," he said to Grukara, "now and always." "I love you too," Grukara said. "Until the stars fall and the mountains crumble, you are mine and I am yours." "Forever," Darren said. "Forever," Grukara agreed. And as the sun sank below the mountains and the first stars appeared in the darkening sky, they sat together, hand in hand, surrounded by the life they had built and the love they had nurtured. It was a simple moment, quiet and unremarkable in its way, but it was also everything. Because in the end, that was what mattered most. Not grand gestures or sweeping changes, but small, steady acts of love and courage, repeated day after day, year after year, until they built something strong enough to withstand any storm. Darren Briggs had been a soldier, then a merchant, and now he was a husband, a father, a grandfather, and a bridge between two worlds. And of all the roles he had played in his life, these last ones were the ones he was most proud of. Grukara Stonefang had been an outcast, then a survivor, and now she was a wife, a mother, a grandmother, and a leader among her people. And she wore these roles with strength and grace, proof that even the deepest wounds could heal, given time and love and safety. Together, they had created something that should not have been possible. But they had done it anyway because they had chosen love over fear, hope over despair, and each other over everything else. And in that choice, they had changed the world, not all at once, not in dramatic, sweeping ways. But slowly, steadily, one heart at a time, they had shown that a different future was possible. That humans and orcs could build lives together. That families could be forged across lines of blood and species. That love, in the end, was stronger than hate. As the night deepened and the children were called in for bed, Darren and Grukara remained outside a little longer, unwilling to let go of the moment. Above them, the stars wheeled in their ancient patterns, and around them, the valley breathed with the quiet sounds of night. "Thank you," Darren said suddenly. Grukara looked at him. "For what?" "For crawling out from under that cargo, for trusting me enough to let me help you, for choosing to stay with me, for building this life with me, for everything." Grukara's eyes glistened in the starlight. "Thank you for stopping to fix that wheel. Thank you for seeing me, for loving me, for giving me reason to hope again. Thank you for being you." They kissed, a gentle press of lips that spoke of years of love and partnership and unwavering commitment. And when they finally stood and went inside, it was together, as they had done everything else. Together, they had traveled from despair to hope, from loneliness to family, from war to peace. Together, they had built a life that honored both their peoples and transcended the boundaries that should have kept them apart. Together, they had proven that love, given a chance, could overcome anything. And as they settled into sleep, surrounded by the warmth of their home and the knowledge of their family sleeping nearby, they both knew that whatever challenges tomorrow might bring, they would face them the same way they had faced everything else, together, always together. And that, in the end, was the greatest triumph of all.